So, what happens when a simple promise, one made during a crisis, goes head-to-head with the strict, black-and-white letter of the law? We're about to dive into an incredible legal idea that was born from the chaos of World War II, one that really makes you rethink what a binding agreement even is.
And that brings us to the big question right up front. Can a simple promise, a verbal assurance, a handshake deal, actually hold up in court without a formal signed and sealed contract? This idea challenges the very foundation of contract law, and really it gets to the heart of what's fair.
Okay, so picture this. It's London during the Blitz. The city is under constant attack. People are fleeing for their lives, and businesses are just trying to survive. It's in this setting that our story starts, with a company named High Trees renting a whole block of apartments from the Central London Property Trust.
Now, with so many people leaving the city, the apartment building was emptying out fast. So the landlord makes a promise, a really critical one. They agree to cut the rent in half, all the way down to £1,250 a year, just to keep High Trees as tenants. It made perfect sense at the time, right? It was a practical move to keep the business going.
And here is the absolute key to this whole story. High Trees believed the landlord. They trusted that promise. They adjusted their budgets. They made their financial plans, all based on this new, lower rent. They stayed put when they probably would have been forced to leave otherwise. Their decision was a direct result of that promise.
All right, now let's fast forward a bit. The war is over, Londoners are coming back, and suddenly, the apartment building is full again. And what does the landlord do? They don't just demand the full rent from that point on. Oh no, they try to claim all the back rent from the war years, the very money they had promised to forgive. And just like that, you've got a huge legal showdown.
The landlord's entire argument was based on a classic legal concept called consideration. You can think of consideration as the price of a promise. For a contract to be valid, both sides have to give something new of value. The landlord basically argued, hey, I gave them a massive rent discount, but what new thing did they give me in return for that promise? And you know what? Under the strict old-school rules of contract law, they actually had a pretty strong case. So the whole mess ends up in court, and you've got this fascinating conflict. On one side, you have the cold, hard letter of the law, and on the other, you have a simple question of fairness. Can you really make a promise, watch someone rely on it, and then just take it back whenever it's convenient for you?
And the judge's decision was, well, nothing short of revolutionary. He said it would be completely unjust to allow the landlord to break their word. He ruled that they were legally estopped, which is just a fancy legal term for stopped or blocked, from clawing back that rent money for the war years.
This one case, this single story, basically created the legal doctrine we now call Promissory Estoppel. It's a powerful idea that was forged in this very courtroom, and it's designed to bring fairness into the sometimes rigid world of law. To put it simply, it stops someone from going back on a clear promise when someone else has already acted on it.
So how does this actually work? I mean, a court can't just apply it any time someone feels something is unfair. It's not that simple. The High Trees case actually laid out a very clear three-part test for when a promise like this should be enforced. It really boils down to three essential ingredients. First, there has to be a crystal clear promise. In our story, that was the deal to accept half the rent. Second, the other person has to actually rely on that promise. They have to change their actions because of it, just like High Trees did by staying. And third, it has to be fundamentally unfair for the person who made the promise to just take it back. All three of those were present here, and that was the magic formula. Now, this idea of fairness really threw a wrench in the old, rigid machinery of contract law. But promissory estoppel isn't some legal superweapon you can use for anything. It's a very specific tool, and it has some really important limits on how it's used today.
Lawyers have a brilliant way of describing this limitation. They say, promissory estoppel is a shield, not a sword. What does that mean? It means you can use it to defend yourself, just like High Trees did when their landlord sued them. But you generally can't use it to start a lawsuit to create a new right out of thin air. It's a defensive tool, not an offensive one.
So what's the big takeaway from this one case that happened decades ago? Well, it's a huge reminder that the law isn't just a set of cold, hard rules. It's also about justice. It stands up for people who act in good faith, and it reinforces a really basic moral principle, that a promise, once relied upon, ought to mean something. And that really leaves us with a fascinating question to chew on, one that goes way beyond the courtroom. In our own lives, with our friends, family, and colleagues, where do we draw that line between a casual remark and a serious promise that should be kept? It's something worth thinking about.